As the chair of SCO,
Shanghai Cooperation Organization Foreign Ministers,
I'm pleased to inform you
SCO
that
Secretary
under our
General,
ongoing presidency,
Director,
we have
SCO,
successfully concluded more than 100 meetings and events,
a very good morning to all of you.
15 ministerial level
It
meetings.
is a great pleasure to welcome you in Goa
enthusiastic participation
to the meeting
from
of the
member
SCO
states,
Council of Foreign
observers,
Ministers.
and dialogue partners.
I'm
of
especially
SCO
delighted
as
to
well.
host you under
Many
the
of
first
the events
ever
hosted
Indian
by
presidency
India
of
were
the SCO.
first-time events.
In the framework
India
of
attaches
the
great
SCO.
importance to the development of
Excellencies,
multifaceted cooperation.
it is gratifying
in
to
the
note
SCO that the further
and to the
deepening
promotion
of the bonds of
of
friendship
peace,
and cooperation,
stability
in SCO, economic development,
and events like the
prosperity,
SCO
millet
and closer
food festival,
interaction between
film
our people.
festival, cultural showcase
As the
at
chair
Surat
of
Pur
the
Mela,
SCO, the
Prime
SCO
Minister
Tourism
Modi
Mart
has
confidence
articulated
on shared Buddhist
India's
heritage
priorities
were all
as
successfully
moving
hosted
towards
by India.
a secure SCO.
I am particularly delighted
Secure
to
stands
note
for
that
security
Varanasi
as the
economic
first SCO
development,
cultural and tourist
connectivity
for
Unity
2022-23
have remained
hosted
our
several
priority
colourful events
in the course of
with
our work
active
as the
participation
chair of SCO
from member states.
this year.
As
I'm pleased
SCO
to
chair,
inform you
we have
that
initiated
under our ongoing
an
presidency,
unprecedented
we
engagement
have successfully
with SCO
concluded
observers and dialogue more than
partners
100
by
meetings and
inviting
events,
them to participate
including
in more
15
than 14
ministerial level
socio-cultural
meetings,
events.
and we have received
Dear colleagues,
enthusiastic participation
as a result of the COVID-19
from member
pandemic
states
and
observers
geopolitical
and
upheavals,
dialogue partners.
the world
of
is
SCO
today facing
as well.
a multitude of challenges.
Many of the events
These
hosted
events
by India
have disrupted global
first-time
supply
events
chains in the
leading
framework
to serious
of the
impact
SCO.
on the supply of energy,
Excellencies,
food, and fertilizers.
it is gratifying to
and
note
cascading
that the
effects
further
on
deepening
developing
of the
nations.
bonds of friendship and
These
cooperation
crises
in
have
SCO
also exposed
and events like
a
the
credibility
SCO
and
Millet
trust
Deficit
food festival,
in the ability of
film
global
festival,
institutions
cultural
to manage
showcase
challenges
at Surat
in a
Pur Mela,
timely and
the
efficient
SCO
manner.
Tourism Mart. These
Conference
challenges
on shared Buddhist
however,
heritage
are also
were
an
all
opportunity
successfully hosted
for member
by
states
India.
of the SCO.
I am particularly
collaborate
delighted
and address
to note that
Varanasi as the first
with more than
cultural
40%
and
of the
tourist
world's
capital
population
for
in the
2022-23,
our collective
hosted several
decisions
colourful
will
events
surely
with
have a
active
global
participation from member states.
Excellencies,
As
while the
SCO
world
chair,
was
we
engaged in
have
facing
initiated
COVID and its
an
consequences,
unprecedented
the menace
engagement
of
with
terrorism
SCO observers and
continues
dialogue partners
unabated.
by inviting
Taking
them
our
to
eyes off this
participate
menace
in
would
more
be
than
detrimental
14
to
social
our security
cultural
interests. Dear
We
colleagues,
firmly believe
that there
as
can
a
be
result
no
of the
justification
COVID-19
for terrorism
pandemic
and
it must be
geopolitical
stopped
upheavals
in all its forms and
the world
manifestations,
is today facing
including
a multitude of
cross-border
challenges.
terrorism. These
The
events
channel of
have
finance
disrupted
for global
terrorist
supply
activities
chains must be seized
leading
and
to
blocked
serious impact
without
on the
distinction.
supply of energy.
Members
food,
need not be
and
reminded
fertilizers
that
and
combating
cascading
terrorism
effects
is
on
one of
developing
the
nations.
original mandates.
These
of the
crises
SCO.
have also
The
exposed
unfolding
a
situation in
credibility
Afghanistan
and trust deficit
remains
in the ability
at
of
the center
global
our attention.
institutions to
Our
manage
efforts should be
challenges
directed towards
in a
the
timely
welfare of the
and
Afghan
efficient
people.
manner. Our immediate priorities, however, are
include
also
providing
an opportunity
humanitarian assistance
for member states
ensuring
of
a
the SCO
truly inclusive
to
and
collaborate
representative government,
and address them,
combating
collectively.
terrorism and drug trafficking
with more than 40%
preserving
of the world's
rights of
population
women,
within the
children,
SCO and minorities.
Our collective decisions will surely
India
have a global
has always stood for multilateral approaches to addressing
Excellencies,
global challenges.
While the world
and
has
has always
engaged
been
in
a
facing
willing partner
COVID and its
in sharing
consequences,
our expertise
the
and
menace of
experience.
terrorism
In this regard,
continues
India's
unabated.
own achievement in the field
Taking
of
our
startups
eyes
and
off this
innovation
menace would be
is a
detrimental
remarkable journey.
to our security
Today,
interests.
there are more than
We
70,000
firmly believe
startups in
that there
India,
can be no
of which
justification
more
for
than
terrorism
100
and
are
it
unicorns.
must be stopped.
We
in all
stand
its
ready
forms and
to share our
manifestations,
experience
including
with member
cross-border terrorism.
Colleagues,
The channel of finances
I would like to express my gratitude to all of you
without
for supporting India's proposal of
Members
creation
need not
of
be
two
reminded
new working groups
that combating
on startups
terrorism
and innovation
is one of
and
the
on
original
traditional
mandates
this
of the
year,
SCO.
last year.
I'm
The
happy to
unfolding
note
situation in
that the
Afghanistan
regulations to
operationalize
at the
these
center
working
of our
groups
attention
have been approved.
Our
My
efforts
efforts
should be directed towards the welfare
Excellencies,
of the Afghan people.
SCO
Our
is in its
immediate
third decade of
priorities
and this
include
is
providing
an opportune
humanitarian
time
assistance,
for its reform and
ensuring a
modernization
truly inclusive
to keep
and
the
representative
organization
government, combating terrorism in a rapidly transforming world, and preserving
I'm pleased
the rights
to know
of women,
that the
children,
discussions on
and
the issues of
minorities.
reform and modernization of the organization
India
already
has
commenced.
always stood for
I assure
multilateral
you
approaches to
that
addressing
India
global
will extend
challenges,
its constructive
and
and
has
active
always
support
been a
for
willing
this
partner
process.
in sharing our expertise.
I
and
also
experience.
seek the support of
In
member
this
states
regard,
for the
India's
long-standing
own achievement
demand
in the field of startups and
of India
innovation
to make English
is a remarkable
as the
journey.
third official language
Today,
of the
there are
organization.
more than 70,000
This will enable
startups
a
in
deeper
India,
engagement
of
with
which
English-speaking
more than
member
100
states.
are unicorns. We stand ready to share our experience
Of the SCO
and will take the work of this
colleagues
organization
in this
to a
context.
wider global
I would like to
audience.
express my
I'm happy
gratitude
to
to all
note
of
that
you
the
for
progress
supporting
on
India's
ongoing
proposal of
for
the
the
creation
admission
of
of
Iran
two
and
new working
Belarus
groups
as full
on
members
startups
of
and
the
innovation,
SCO
and I thank
traditional
the
medicines.
Secretariat for
This
their efforts
last
in
year.
that direction.
I'm happy to
Similarly,
note
I'm
that
delighted
the regulations
that 4
to
new
operationalize
operationalize
these
will
working
sign
groups
the
have been
MOU for their
approved
association
by member states.
with SCO
Excellencies,
in Goa.
SCO
We welcome
is
our
in
new
its
dialogue
third decade
partners
of existence
and hope to intensify
and this is an
engagement
opportune
with them
time
in the
for
SCO
its reform and modernization.
Excellencies,
To keep the
India has
organization
proposed a New
relevant
Delhi declaration
in a rapidly
as an
transforming
SCO
world.
summit declaration.
I'm pleased to note
and 4
that the
other
discussions on the
thematic joint
issues of
statements
reform and modernization
and cooperation
of the
in
organization have
de-radicalization
already commenced.
strategies,
I assure
promotion
you
of millets,
that India will
sustainable
extend its
lifestyles to
constructive
address
and
climate
active
change
support for
and
this
digital
process.
transformation. I
I
also
also
seek
seek
the
the
timely
support of member
finalization
states
of these
for the
documents
long-standing
for approval
demand
by our leaders
at the
of India
SCO
to make English as the
I'm
third
confident
official language of the organization. This will enable a deeper engagement with English-speaking member states of the SCO and will take the work of this organization to a wider global audience. I'm happy to note that the progress on ongoing process for the admission of Iran and Belarus as full members of the SCO. I thank the Secretariat for their efforts in that direction. Similarly, I'm delighted that 4 new dialogue partners will sign the MOU for their association with SCO today.
It's really important
in
to
Goa.
put the South China Sea in that global context. It is, if you like, everyone's business. It's so vital to international connectivity, to maritime trade.
Countries both from Southeast Asia as well as China would like to push for intensifying the Code of Conduct negotiations. However, we've heard that before, most recently in 2020, and nothing has come of that.
In 1990s, when the U.S. withdrew from Philippines, they take the mischief leave, so they are safe.
If you develop an economic dependence on China, then you're in trouble in the long run, whether that's Australia or whether that's countries elsewhere in the world.
China's narrative that it is the United States and its warships or other naval powers that are destabilizing the region, those are us helping to keep the South China Sea open.
If Japan possessed the counter-strike capability and India possessed the strike capability, China cannot ignore the two sides at the same time.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to another edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. This is a special edition which is being recorded at the Raisina Dialogue held in March 2023 in New Delhi. Our topic today is about an issue that could turn into a global flashpoint: the South China Sea quagmire, principles or compromise. China is in conflict with its maritime neighbors and there is an impasse which can negatively impact all of Asia. Before I introduce the guests, here's a short explainer. The South China Sea is one of the busiest waterways. It has several small islands, and the disputes are over the claims made by China, Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, and Brunei over these waterways that date back almost 70 years. The disputes have affected maritime trade as well as bilateral relations between these two countries. The US is also involved in this dispute as it has maritime security interests in this region. What is India's interest in this dispute? Well, 55% of India's trade passes through the Straits of Malacca, which opens into the South China Sea. Over to the experts we have today. Dr. Lin Kwok, Shangri-La Dialogue Senior Fellow for Asia Pacific Security at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Singapore. She's got a stellar resident fellow at the Hudson Institute, USA. Satoru Nagao has held numerous research positions in diplomatic and political field. He's also been a security analyst at the Ministry of
Your
Foreign Affairs.
Excellencies,
Professor
the
Rory
Shanghai
Metcalf,
Cooperation
Professor and Head of
Organization
National
Foreign
Security
Ministers,
College, ANU, Australia.
Secretary
He has 3
General,
decades of experience across
Director,
diplomacy and
SCO,
intelligence analysis, academia and
Dear
journalism.
colleagues,
He's a serving board member
very
of the
good morning
National
to all of you.
Foundation for Australia-China
It
Relations
is
at the
a
ANU
great
Cyber
pleasure to welcome you in
Institute
Goa
and an Australian representative
to the meeting
on the
of the
ASEAN
SCO
Regional
Council
Forum
of Foreign
Register
Ministers.
of Experts and Eminent
I'm
Persons.
especially
Dr.
delighted
Kwok,
to
I'll begin
host you
with you.
under the
Is it
first
possible for
ever
China to
Indian
break the current
presidency
impasse
of
in
the
the
SCO?
South-China dispute?
India
The COVID
attaches
years
great
have not
importance
seen
to the development
China
of
showing any
multifaceted
signs of
cooperation
accommodation.
in the
So do you
SCO
think that this impasse
and
can
to the
stop now?
promotion
Well,
of
thank you,
peace,
first of all, for
stability,
having me on this show.
economic development.
On your question, I'm not
prosperity,
entirely
and
confident.
closer
In fact, I'm not confident at all that
between
the
our people.
impasse can be broken. There's been recent
As the
talks
chair
about
of
how
the SCO,
countries, both
Prime
from
Minister
Southeast
Modi
Asia as well as China,
has
would like to
articulated
push for
India's
intensifying the
priorities
Code of Conduct
as
negotiations.
moving towards
However,
a
we've heard that
secure
before,
SCO.
most recently in
SCO
2020, and nothing has
stands
come
for
of that. And of course, if
security,
you have to, if we think
economic
about it,
development,
these Code of Conduct
connectivity,
negotiations have been in the making
unity
for some 2 decades
have
now,
remained our
with very
priority
little
in the
to show
course of
for.
our work as the
I think there's
chair of
several
SCO
things that
this year.
stand in the way of concluding a meaningful
pleased
code of
to
conduct,
inform
which
you
will help to,
that under
if
our
not break the
ongoing
impasse, but at
presidency,
least to reduce
we have
the impasse.
successfully
Things
concluded
like the scope
more
of
than
application of the
100
code of
meetings and
conduct.
events,
Whether it should apply to the
15
entirety of the South China Sea as
ministerial
China would
meetings,
want, or only in
and we have
areas of
received
dispute.
the enthusiastic
The sort of
participation
dispute resolution
from
mechanism,
member
whether it
states,
should
observers,
merely be
and
bilateral
dialogue
negotiations with
partners
China,
of
or
SCO
parties would
as well.
have
Many of
ability
the
to have
events
recourse
hosted by
to
India
the mandatory
were
dispute
first-time
resolution
events
mechanisms
in the
under
framework
the United
of the
Nations
SCO.
Convention on the Law of the Sea. So there are these
Excellencies,
stumbling blocks
it
to
is
concluding
gratifying to
a
note
meaningful code of
that the
conduct.
further
That
deepening
said, I
of the
think
bonds of
China has
friendship and
every
cooperation
reason to
in
seek to
SCO,
help to
and
reduce
events
tensions
like the SCO
with its
Millet
neighbors,
Food Festival,
given that its
Film
competition
Festival,
with the United States is
cultural
fast
showcase
heating
at
up. So I think it makes
Surajpur
sense. If I were
the
China,
SCO
I would be
Tourism March,
seeking to reduce
conference
tensions
on
with my
shared
neighbors,
Buddhist
especially since
heritage,
those tensions
were
have
all
allowed the
successfully
United
hosted
States to
by
forge
India.
stronger ties
I'm
with
particularly
even
delighted
erstwhile
to note that Varanasi
with countries like
as the
Vietnam,
first
with whom it fought
SCO cultural and
2
tourist
decades worth of a
capital
war.
for 2022-23
So I think if
hosted
China
several
were thinking
colourful
strategically
events
about
with
its
active
position in the region, it would
participation
certainly be
from member
seeking
states.
to break this impasse and
As
forge
SCO
stronger
chair,
ties with its
we have
neighbors.
initiated
And even recharge
an
relationships which had,
engagement
stagnated,
with
like say
SCO
maybe
observers
with
and
Philippines.
dialogue partners by
I'm going to
inviting
come
them
to you,
participate
Dr.
in more
Nagao.
than 14
You've studied and written about the role of
socio-cultural
Quad and the close
Dear
ties
colleagues,
between India and Japan,
as a result of the COVID-19
with regard especially
pandemic
to
and
expansionist China.
geopolitical upheavals.
Why is
The
there no
world is
coordinated
today facing
strategy
a
among
multitude of
Asian
challenges.
countries to resolve the
These
South
events
China
have
dispute?
disrupted global
To
supply
deter
chains,
China's
leading to
territorial
serious
expansion,
impact
we
on the
need to
supply
check the
of
pattern
energy,
of China's
food,
territorial
and
expansion.
fertilizers,
There
and
are
cascading
3
effects
features.
on
Firstly,
developing
they
nations.
ignore the
These
international law.
crises have
For
also
example,
exposed
what happened in the East
a
China
credibility
Sea
and
is
trust
the
deficit
example.
in the
Before
ability of
the
global
1970s,
institutions
they
to
have
manage
claimed
challenges
Senkaku
in a
Island
timely
of Japan
and efficient manner.
is
These
their territory.
challenges,
So
however,
since
are also an
1971,
opportunity
they realized
for member
how
states of
important
the
they
SCO
start to say,
collaborate
they start claim
and
this
address
is their territory, but this is ridiculous
with more
from
than
the
40%
international law.
of the world's population
And
within the SCO,
secondly, is when they
our
find the
collective
power vacuum, they
decisions
try to
will
steal
surely
it.
have a
So,
global impact.
for example, what happened in South China Sea is
Excellencies,
1950s when
while the
France
world
withdrew
was
from this
engaged in
region, they
facing
take the
COVID
half
and
of
its
the Paracel
consequences,
Island. In
the menace
1970s,
of
when US
terrorism
withdrew another
continues
half of the
unabated.
Paracel Island taken by
Taking
China.
our eyes off
And
this menace
in
would be
1980s, when
detrimental
Soviet troops
to our
withdrew from
security
Vietnam, they take 6 feet
We
of the
firmly
Spratly
believe
Island.
that there can
In
be no
1990s,
justification
when
for
the
terrorism,
US withdrew from
and it must
Philippines,
be
they take
stopped
the Mischief
in all
Reef.
its
So
forms and
they are thief.
manifestations,
When they
including
find the power vacuum,
cross-border
they steal
terrorism.
it. Military balance has changed,
channel
they
of
steal
finance
it. That is
for
a pattern.
terrorist
And the third
activities
pattern
must be
is
seized
their
and
effort
blocked
is including
without
economic
restriction.
effort to other aspects, not only the
Members
military.
need not be
That is
reminded
another effort. So
that
BRI
combating
is one
terrorism
example.
is one
So
of
to
the
deter
original
China's territorial
mandates
expansion,
of the
how to
SCO.
do that? Yes, their
unfolding
budget is
situation in
increasing very
Afghanistan
high. So to maintain military
remains
powers,
at
we
the
should
center of
increase
our
the
attention.
defense budget. That's
Our
true. But
efforts should be directed
China is
towards
rich,
the
not
welfare
easy.
of the
So
Afghan
that's
people.
why another method
Our
is
immediate
needed.
priorities
That's why we can point it out to deter China's expansion in South China Sea.
ensuring
If
a
the
truly
four
inclusive
countries
and
cooperate, China
representative
need to
government,
divide their budget the
combating
multi-direction
terrorism and drug
against Japan,
trafficking,
against India,
and
against
preserving the rights
Southeast
of
Asian
women,
countries,
children,
because
and minorities.
cooperation to support Southeast Asian countries by
India has
using the
always
Quad
stood for
framework.
multilateral
So that's
approaches to
why
addressing
to
global
maintain
challenges
military
and
balance,
has
because of the
always been a
budget,
willing partner
this cooperation
in
is
sharing our
effective. So China
expertise
cannot
and
move,
experience.
even in the South
this
China Sea.
regard,
We
India's
cooperate
own
enough.
achievement
That's
in the
why
field of
Quad
startups
in the
and
South China Sea
innovation
issue is
is a
combined.
remarkable
Long
journey.
explanation. Thank you very much.
Today, there are
Okay,
more
so
than
that's kind of
70,000
revolutionary, or
startups in
should I
India,
say that would
of
make
which
China
than
more
100 are unicorns.
wary, or even
We
Russia more
stand
wary
ready
about
to
have
share our
the Quad getting
experience
military
with member
connotations.
states.
Professor
Colleagues,
Metcalf, I come to you.
in
You know,
this
Australia
context,
is
I would
seen
like
as
to express
a kind
my
of a
gratitude
middle
to all
power
of you
in
for
and
supporting
an
India's
ally of
proposal of
the
creation
US,
of
which
two
has
new
interests
working
in
groups
South China
on
Sea.
startups
Can
and
it risk
innovation
a
and on
conflict
traditional
with
medicines
China?
this year,
And
last year.
will it engage
I'm
more
happy to
for
note
conflict
that the
resolution now,
regulations to
especially with the Quad,
operationalize
as
these working
was
groups
said,
have been approved
that the Quad has
by member
strategic
states.
interests now. So will
Excellencies,
it become more
SCO
involved
is in
in
its
conflict
third decade
resolution?
of existence.
Look, thank
and this
you.
is an opportune
and
time
I think that
for its reform
Australia's
and
role,
modernization
like so many
to
other
keep the
powers in the world,
organisation
is one of a stakeholder
relevant
in
in a
the
rapidly
security and stability of the
transforming
South
world.
China Sea. I
I'm
think it's really
pleased to
important to
note
put
that the
the South
discussions
China
on
Sea
the
in that
issues
global
of reform
context.
and
It is,
modernization
if
of
you
the
like,
organisation
everyone's
have
business.
already
It's so
commenced.
vital
I
to
assure you
international
that
connectivity,
India will extend
to
its
maritime
constructive
trade,
and
global
active support
commons,
for this process.
fisheries, and also as
I also
a
seek the support of member
laboratory, if you
states
like, as to
for
whether
the
multiple
long-standing
nations can
demand
resolve
of
essentially
India to make
territorial
English
differences.
as the third
And I will
official
come back to
language
your answer
of the
about Australia,
organisation.
but
This
just
will
to
enable
note that
a deeper engagement with
there are
English-speaking member states.
There are some green shoots, some positive signs. Look at Indonesia and Vietnam, for example, essentially
of the SCO,
agreeing
and will take the work of
on
this
the
organisation
demarcation of
to a
their
wider
EEZ
global audience.
boundaries recently. So
I'm happy
there
to
are
note that
law-based
the progress on
solutions
ongoing process
if
for the
players,
admission
and of
of
course
Iran
the big player
and
being
Belarus
China, were
as
ever
full
willing to
members
actually
of the
countenance.
SCO.
Where
I
Australia
thank
comes
the
into the picture
Secretariat for their
is,
efforts
you're
in
right,
that
as a
direction.
stakeholder,
Similarly,
as an ally of the
I'm
United
delighted
States, but
that
also as an
4
independent
new
power
dialogue partners
in the
will sign the
Indo-Pacific.
MOU for their association
And I guess
with SCO
I believe our government's
today
trying to do
in
multiple
Goa.
things here. On
We
the one
welcome our
hand,
new
you know,
dialogue
we're
partners
asserting our
and
rights
hope to
as,
intensify
if you like, a
engagement with
power
them
that,
in the SCO format.
relies on the South China Sea
Excellencies,
for our own economy.
India has proposed
So rights
a
of
New Delhi
overflight,
declaration
transit, freedom
as
of
an
navigation are
SCO
of great
summit
interest to
declaration,
Australia, even if we're not
and
doing
4 other
traditional,
thematic joint
or
statements
conventional
on
FONOPs. but
cooperation in
our Air Force does
de-radicalization,
maritime surveillance
strategies,
there, as we've done
promotion
for
of
30
millets,
or 40 years.
sustainable lifestyles to address
And we are
climate
interested
change
in a
and
strategic
digital
balance and
transformation.
equilibrium in the
I seek
region
your support in
where
timely
China can't be
finalization of these documents
coercive or
for
assertive
approval
at the
by our
expense of
leaders
others.
at the SCO
But
summit.
we're also interested
I'm confident
in
that
preventing escalation. And I think that I wouldn't necessarily call it conflict resolution because we're a long, long way from that. But Australia, like so many other powers now, has an interest in ensuring that on the one hand, aggressive action is deterred, but that in doing that,
Your
we're not
Excellencies,
further
the
destabilising the
Shanghai
situation. So
Cooperation
therefore, there's a
Organization
lot of
Foreign
talk now of
Ministers,
guardrails, of conflict-building
SCO
measures, of
Secretary
risk
General,
reduction measures.
Director,
The code of
SCO
conduct may
Rats.
not be the solution there because, as
Dear
we've heard, it's
colleagues,
moved at a glacial pace, and
a very good
China's
morning to
almost
all of
sought to
you.
weaponise those negotiations
It is
in ways
a
that
great pleasure
exclude
to welcome you in
legitimate
Goa
global stakeholders in the South
the
China
meeting
Sea
of
from
the
actually
SCO Council of
being in
Foreign
the South
Ministers.
China Sea. But there is,
I'm
I think, a
especially
renewed
delighted
interest
to
now
host
in
you
using, for
under the
example,
first
regional
ever
fora,
Indian
regional
president
groupings
of
to
the
set some
SCO.
standards to
India
reduce the
attaches
risks
great
of
importance
conflict and
to the
escalation
development
there, and
of
that's something that I would
multifaceted
encourage India,
cooperation
for example,
in
to
the
take
SCO
a closer interest.
and to the promotion
China has
of
this,
peace, stability,
it's particularly
economic
irked of that
development,
about
prosperity,
AUKUS.
and closer
And
interaction
it sees that
between
it's
our people.
born out of a Cold War mentality.
As the chair of the
Some of the
SCO,
politicians are even
Prime
making
Minister
veiled
Modi
threats
has
against
articulated
Australia.
India's
What is the
priorities
perception in
as
Australia?
moving
Is
towards
China viewed as a
secure
threatening
SCO.
power at all, or does
Secure
trade surmount
stands
everything
for
else?
security,
There are so many answers to
economic
that
development,
question. There's so many questions embedded
connectivity,
there.
unity,
Look, I think
have
long
remained
story
our
of
priority
the Australia-China
in the course of
relationship,
our work
just as
as the
China's
chair of SCO
relations with
this
many
year.
other powers over the past decade,
I'm pleased to
has
inform you
been
that under our
you
ongoing
can't
presidency,
separate the economics
we
and the
have
security of the
successfully
economics and
concluded
strategy. If
more
you
than
develop an
100
economic
meetings and
dependence on
events,
China, then you're in trouble
including
in the
15
long run,
ministerial
whether that's
level meetings,
Australia or whether
and we have
that's
received
countries
the
elsewhere in the world.
enthusiastic participation
You mentioned
from
the,
member states,
the technology
observers,
sharing arrangement
and
that's
dialogue
been
partners
labelled
of
AUKUS.
SCO
But
as
that's
well.
really just one
Many of the
piece of the
events
much larger
hosted by
regional
India
puzzle of balancing.
were
So
first-time
AUKUS is
events
essentially
in the framework
Australia
of
working
the
with
SCO.
two very trusted partners to build
Excellencies,
stronger
it is
capabilities
gratifying
so
to
that a
note
stronger Australia
that the
can be a
further
stronger
deepening
partner
of the
to others
bonds
in the
of friendship
region.
and cooperation
The fact
in
that we're now
SCO
considering building
and events like
the kinds of
SCO
submarines
Millet
that China
Food
already
Festival,
has all over
Film
the South
Festival,
China Sea. So I don't
cultural
forget that in a
showcase
sense,
at Suraj Mela,
Australia, like
the
others,
SCO tourism
whether it's
march,
India or
conference
Japan or
on
others, is
shared
literally
Buddhist
trying to
heritage
catch up
were all
and balance and
successfully
protect our
hosted
interests.
by India.
Of course, that's irking
I am
China because
particularly
it's
delighted
reinforcing
to
the
note
realisation
that
in
Varanasi,
Beijing that it can't
as the
dominate
first
the
SCO
region. So
cultural
it's going
and
to play
tourist
a very
capital
aggressive
for
campaign of
2022-23
disinformation to suggest that
hosted
somehow
several
those
colourful
reacting
events
to China's military
with active
modernisation
participation from member states.
destabilises, whereas the truth is precisely
As SCO chair,
the other way around.
we have initiated
and to conclude on that
an
point,
unprecedented
where the current
engagement
Australian
with
government
SCO observers
is
and
going, I
dialogue
think, is a
partners
relationship of
by inviting
stabilising
them to
ties with
participate
China,
in
but
more
not
than
walking
14
back on
social
any of the
cultural
national
events.
security measures we've
Dear
taken to
colleagues,
protect our interests as a
As a
sovereign
result of the
power, and that
COVID-19 pandemic
includes
and geopolitical
developing
upheavals,
substantial naval
the world
capabilities
is today
such as
facing
through
a multitude
AUKUS.
of challenges.
Lynn, I'm going to come back to you.
These
You're in,
events have disrupted
you're based in
global
Singapore,
supply chains,
so not
leading to
technically so
serious
close to the
impact on the
South China
supply
Sea
of
problem. But
energy,
you've been
food,
watching
and fertilizers,
the whole Quad
and cascading effects
fracas which
on
happened
developing
here in
nations.
New Delhi.
These
The
crises
foreign ministers
have
meeting,
also exposed
apparently the
a
South
credibility
China
and trust
Sea did come
deficit
up for
in the
discussion.
ability of
And the
global
statement is
institutions
indicative
to
that the
manage
members
challenges
kept
in a
reiterating
timely
that
and
Quad is
efficient
not a
manner.
military alliance, but Russia doesn't
These
believe in that.
challenges,
China, of course, will
however,
not believe
are
that.
also an opportunity
And there are
for
strong
member
overtones
states of
about
the
China.
SCO
The
to
whole thing that
collaborate
they're saying,
and
we
address
strongly
them
support, I'm quoting,
collectively.
we strongly support the principles
With
of
more than
freedom,
40%
rule
of
of
the
law,
world's
sovereignty,
population
territorial
within the
integrity,
SCO,
peaceful
our
settlement of
collective
disputes without
decisions
resorting to
will surely
threat or use
have
of
a global
force,
impact.
freedom of navigation, overflight,
Excellencies,
oppose any
while the
unilateral
world
attempt
was
to change
engaged
the
in
status
facing
quo,
COVID and
all
its
of which are
consequences,
essential to the peace,
the menace
stability,
of
prosperity of the
terrorism
Indo-Pacific region and
continues
beyond.
unabated.
These are all veiled,
Taking our eyes off this menace
may not be
would be
threats, but
detrimental
signaling
to
to
our
China,
security
isn't it?
interests.
Yes, I
We
think the
firmly
short
believe
answer
that there
to
can
your
be no
question is yes.
justification for
I think there
terrorism,
are certain
and it must be
implicit or
stopped
veiled
in all its
criticisms of
forms
China's
and
behavior
manifestations,
in the South China
including
Sea in that
cross-border
statement.
terrorism. The channel of
You
finances for
mentioned
terrorist
the Quad
activities
earlier
must
and
be
how
seized
it's
and
perceived
blocked
in the region. I
without
think the
restriction.
first point to note is that
Members
whereas when
need
we
not
first
be
started
reminded that
when the
combating
Indo-Pacific
terrorism
concept or
is
strategy
one of
first
the
emerged,
original
a few years
mandates
ago,
of the SCO.
countries in Southeast Asia were very
The unfolding
hesitant to
situation in
kind of go on
Afghanistan
board with that concept because they
remains
worried
at
about
the
what China
center of
might
our
think, what
attention.
it might mean
Our
for ASEAN,
efforts should be
etc.
directed towards the welfare
Come the
of the
Quad, when
Afghan
that
people.
came along, I think you
Our
saw
immediate
countries, in a
priorities
sense, being more
include
accepting
providing
of
humanitarian
alternative
assistance,
I
ensuring
guess,
a truly
frameworks
inclusive and
or
representative
architectures
government,
or overlapping
combating
architectures for
terrorism and
helping
drug
to manage
trafficking,
disputes in the
and
region
preserving
or
the rights of women,
balance the power in the
children,
region.
and
So, for
minorities.
instance, Singapore said that the Quad was to be
India
welcomed
has always stood for multilateral
if it brought
approaches to
greater
addressing
peace and
global
stability to the
challenges
region and if
has
it
always been a
complemented
willing
ASEAN's
partner
role in the region
in
as well.
sharing our expertise
And
and
you had the
experience.
Philippines foreign
In this
minister
regard,
then
India's
who
own
talked about the
achievement in
Quad
the field of
being
startups
welcomed
and
because,
innovation
frankly,
is a remarkable
ASEAN didn't seem
Today,
able
there are
on its
more than
own managing
70,000
the region's
startups in
problems.
India, of
And the
which
region's problems
more
are
than
many.
100 are unicorns.
It's China's behavior
We
in the South
stand
China
ready
Sea, the sort
to
of
share our experience with
objections
member
to
states.
valid assertions of rights,
Colleagues,
navigational
in this
rights and
context,
freedoms
I would like to
that
express
you
my
highlighted in the
gratitude to
statement.
all of you
It's
for
the implicit
supporting India's
threat or use of
proposal of
force
creation
of two
to
new
resolve
working
those
groups
disputes.
on startups and innovation
and its
and on traditional
encroachments
medicines
upon
this year.
the exclusive economic zones
I'm
of
happy
various
to
coastal
note
states in the
that
south,
the
surrounding the
regulations
South
to
China Sea, which really is
operationalize
the
these
bread and
working groups
butter,
have been
or the
approved
fish and oil
by
and
member
gas,
states.
which helps
Excellencies,
sustain the livelihoods of,
SCO
in many
is
cases,
in
very
its
poor
third
Southeast
decade
Asian
of
countries.
existence,
So
and this is an
yes, those
opportune
statements,
time
that
for its
statement
reform
was
and
in fact a veiled
modernization
criticism of
to
China's
keep the
behavior.
organization
But I think
relevant
going beyond
in a
that, I think we
rapidly
also need to
transforming world.
think a little bit
I'm
about
pleased to
how
note that the
other
discussions on the
countries
issues
might be
of reform and
contributing
modernization
to
of the
instability in the region.
organization have already
I
commenced.
don't buy
I assure
China's
you that
narrative
India
that
will
it is the
extend
United
its
States and its
constructive and active
warships or
support
other naval
for this
powers
process.
that are destabilizing the region by
I also
its
seek
warships.
the
I think
support of
those are
member
us
states
helping
for the
to keep
long-standing
the South
demand,
China Sea
of
open
India to make
by
English
asserting
as the third
lawful
official language of the
navigational rights
organization.
and freedoms.
This will enable
But I think
a
there
deeper
are
engagement
certain
with
acts that
English-speaking member
perhaps could
states.
be avoided, like painting the current geopolitical competition
of the
between
SCO,
the
and will
United
take the
States
work
and
of this
China as
organization
having
to
an
a wider
ideological
global
basis. I don't
audience.
think that necessarily
I'm happy to
helps
note
improve
that
the
the
situation
progress on ongoing
because
process for
it
the admission of
introduces more
Iran
problems
and
into
Belarus
the
as full
already
members of the SCO.
mounting list of
I
problems
thank
that
the
the United States and
Secretariat for their
China
efforts
already
in that
face.
direction.
Speaking of
Similarly,
warships,
I'm
why
delighted
has
that
the
4
US
new
Navy sent
dialogue partners will
Nimitz?
sign the MOU
It's
for
one of
their
the oldest
association
nuclear
with
powered
SCO
ships.
today in
What
Goa.
combat
We
value can it
welcome our new
bring?
dialogue partners.
I
and
think
hope to
the US,
intensify
as well as other naval
engagement with them
powers,
in the
France,
SCO format.
for instance, or
Excellencies,
even other
India
European
has
powers,
proposed
etc. I mean, they
a
send
New Delhi declaration as an
various naval
SCO
vessels
summit
into the region,
declaration,
perhaps
and 4
sometimes to
other
demonstrate
thematic joint statements
strength
on
and resolve,
cooperation in
but also there's a
de-radicalization
symbolic value
strategies,
to
promotion of
various
millets, sustainable lifestyles to
deployments.
address climate change
I think it's very
and
important
digital
that the
transformation.
US, as well as
I
others,
seek your
send
support in
naval
timely
vessels to the
finalization
region
of these
to
documents for approval by our
highlight
leaders
that they are
at the
merely
SCO
asserting
summit.
lawful rights that are
confident
vested
that
under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea when they apply the waters of the South China Sea. And I think, we shouldn't always be thinking about military might and what a particular asset brings to the table in terms of military might. We must also think about what it means symbolically. The optics, but symbolically. So when Europe or other middle powers send vessels to the region to support or promote the rules-based order, I think that sends a strong message. It sends the message that it isn't just about US-China competition. What's at stake here isn't US-China competition and the US seeking to dominate the region over China, but it's also about just
Your
we're
Excellencies,
concerned about
the
rules-based order.
Shanghai
We're concerned about what's happening in the
Organization
region.
Foreign
We're concerned that
Ministers,
if there are
SCO
disputes,
Secretary
that's
General,
fine, but let's have the disputes
Director, SCO
resolved or managed in
branch.
accordance to international law,
Dear
the
colleagues,
guardrails that.
a very good morning to all of you.
Dr. Naga, I'm
It
going to
is
come to you.
a great pleasure
The
to
Philippines
welcome
is
you
in
in
talks
Goa
to possibly include
to the meeting
Australia
of
and
the
Japan
SCO Council of Foreign
in sea
Ministers.
patrols with the US.
I'm
So
especially
one
delighted
question
to
on that,
host
and
you
the
under
second
the
question
first
is
ever
that
Indian presidency
the countries in
of
the
the
immediate
SCO.
vicinity of China,
India
they
attaches
face
great
similar kind of
importance
threat.
to
But
the
I'm
development of
I asked you this
multifaceted
even in the beginning.
cooperation
Why
in
is
the
there no
SCO
coordinated system
and to the
to
promotion
deal like
of
a
peace,
coordinated
stability,
security system? You talked about
economic
increasing
development,
military budgets,
prosperity,
but
and
there needs
closer
to be more
interaction
than that
between our people.
to secure these regions, don't you feel?
As the chair
Of
of
course,
the SCO,
coordination is best.
Prime Minister Modi
but all
has
these countries
articulated
are sovereign
India's
country,
priorities
independent country,
as
so
moving
they
towards
have their
a
attitude,
secure
they have
SCO.
their strategy. So coordination
Secure
is a very
stands
tough
for
job.
security,
In this case, of course,
economic
United
development,
States should show the
connectivity,
leadership. In this
unity
region, for a
have
long time,
remained
hub
our
and spoke
priority
system is
in the course of
a
our
main
work
system
as
to
the chair of
maintain the
SCO
balance. Hub and
this
spoke
year.
means that United States is
I'm pleased to inform
center
you
and
that under our
based on the
ongoing
bilateral
presidency,
alliance between
have
the US and
successfully
Japan,
concluded
US and
more
Australia,
than
US and
100 meetings
Philippines.
and events,
Bilateral basis
including
alliance
15
consists of full
ministerial
security
level
system.
meetings,
In this case,
and
all
we
of
have
the
received
information
the
gathered in the United
enthusiastic
States, but Japan and
participation
Philippines do not
from
share the
member
information.
states,
Japan and Australia do not share the
and dialogue
information,
partners
even if they
of
are ally
SCO
of the United
as well.
States. So,
Many of the
so in
events
this case,
hosted by
if
India
coordination
were
moves,
first-time events
we should
in the
establish. In this
framework
case, U.S.
of the
leads
SCO.
all of the activity. But
Excellencies,
United States
it is
need to
gratifying
deal
to
with
note
many issues
that
in
the
the
further
world
deepening
now.
of
So
the
in this
bonds
case,
of
they need
friendship
to
and
deal with
cooperation
Russia, Ukraine,
in SCO,
or they need to deal
and
with
events
Middle
like
East.
the
So
SCO
under such kind
Millet
of
Food
situations,
Festival,
United States
Film
as
Festival,
allies should
cultural
share more
showcase at
security
Surat
burden in this
Mela,
region. And
the
Japan
SCO
tried to
Tourism
reply it,
Month,
Philippines tried to
Conference
reply it.
on shared
So
Buddhist
coordination has
heritage
just started.
were all
So under such
successfully
kind of
hosted by
situations,
India.
this coordination is
I'm particularly
improving but
delighted
under process.
to note
Not
that Varanasi
established like
as the
NATO
first
because
SCO
they have
cultural
long
and
history,
tourist
but we do not have the
capital
long
for
history
2022-23
in this region, in the Indo-Pacific.
hosted several
That's why
colourful
that
events
coordination hasn't
with
happened,
active
but
participation
improving.
from member
That is my
states.
answer to your question, I think.
Right.
As SCO
Do
chair,
you think that there is
we
a
have
hesitation in
initiated
that we
an
don't want to become a
unprecedented
NATO?
engagement with SCO
NATO,
observers and
because
dialogue
you can
partners
compare the
by
geographical
inviting them to
area.
participate
NATO
in
is
more
Europe,
than
and in
14
American
socio-cultural
based
events.
map, Europe is
Dear
very
colleagues,
big, but indeed Europe is
as a
more
result of the
small
COVID-19
region, so it
pandemic
is more
and
easy to
geopolitical
coordinate. But
upheavals,
in the Pacific, very,
the
very, very
world
big.
is today
So in this
facing a
case,
multitude of
in this
challenges.
case, coordination is
These events
very,
have
very big
disrupted
tough
global
job.
supply chains,
So of
leading
course,
to serious
if we
impact
can
on the
establish this
supply
region
of
NATO,
energy,
it will be the
food,
very
and
effective way
fertilizers,
to deter China.
and
That's
cascading
true.
effects
China has
on developing nations.
China's ally is only
These
one, North
crises
Korea. The treaty-based
have
allies
also
on North Korea.
exposed
And Russia and
a
Pakistan,
credibility and
Myanmar,
trust
they
deficit
will be the
in
partner,
the
but
ability of
not
global
formal ally.
institutions
United States
to manage
side, 52
challenges
allies,
in a
even if
timely
we only
and
count
efficient manner.
treaty-based ally.
These
And
challenges,
so coordination
however,
itself
are
is very
also an
difficult, but
opportunity
achieves some part
for
of
member
it,
states
not
of the
China.
SCO
The United States has
to
achieved.
collaborate
And this
and
number
address
of the coordination is
collectively.
decisive factor in the last three
With more than
competitions in the
40%
past,
of
the
the
World War
world's
I, the
population
32
within the
versus
SCO,
4, the 32 win,
our collective
and
decisions
World War II,
will
the
surely
54 versus
have a
8, the
global
54
impact.
win. And the Cold War between US and
Excellencies,
Soviet in 54
while the
win
world
and
was
26
engaged in
lose.
facing
So in
COVID
this
and its
case, this
consequences,
number is very
the
big,
menace of
important. So that's
terrorism
why you are right. The
continues
coordination of
unabated.
the many countries is
Taking
very
our
important.
eyes off
But
this
because of
menace
these
would
many
be
countries, it is
detrimental
not easy
to
to
our
achieve.
security
That's what
interests.
happened, I think.
So,
We
Rory, I'm
firmly
going to come
believe
back to you.
that there can be no
Is this
justification
hub
for
and spoke
terrorism,
and
and it must
bilateral
be stopped in all its
security
forms and manifestations,
mechanisms?
including
Will that
cross-border
work, or is
terrorism.
there possibility of a new
The channel of
Indo-Pacific
finances for
security
terrorist
initiative
activities
coming
must
up
be
in the near
seized
future?
and blocked without
Well,
distinction.
I think I'd reinforce
Members need not be
the
reminded
assessments of my
that
colleagues on the
combating
panel here
terrorism
about the
is
complexity
one
of
of
the
the
regional
original
security
mandates
architecture.
of the
There's no
SCO.
one-size-fits-all. There's no
The unfolding situation
there's no
in
regional
Afghanistan
NATO, nor is
remains
the
at the
region
center
going to
of our
solve all of
attention.
its problems purely
Our
through
efforts should be
the
directed
well-meaning
towards the welfare
multilateralism
of the Afghan
of
people.
ASEAN or ASEAN
Our
central
immediate
institutions.
priorities,
There's, I guess, a
include
multi-layered
providing
solution
humanitarian
here, or at least a
assistance,
multi-layered way
ensuring a
of
truly
managing
inclusive and
strategic problem. And the
representative
strategic
government,
problem is, at
combating
one level,
terrorism
ensuring
and
that
drug trafficking,
coercion
and
doesn't
preserving
succeed,
the rights
that
of
might
women,
does not make
children,
right,
and
but
minorities.
also that stability can be maintained in the process.
India
The hub
has
and
always
spokes model,
stood
where
for
the United
multilateral
States was the
approaches to
centre of
addressing
a system
global
of bilateral
challenges
alliances.
and
It still
has
exists, but
always
it's
been a willing
evolving.
partner in sharing
And we're
our
now seeing, of
expertise
course, the
and
spokes being
experience.
connected.
In this
So a
regard,
web arrangement.
India's
The Quad
own achievement in
obviously
the field
is
of startups and
important in that,
innovation
but also the trilateral,
is a remarkable
Australia,
journey.
Japan, the
Today,
United States.
there are more than 70,000
Australia, Japan,
startups in
India,
India,
Japan,
of which more
India,
than
the United States.
100
You can
are
go
unicorns.
on. We're even doing
We
things now
stand ready
with the French
to
or with
share
the
our
Indonesians
experience
as well.
with member states.
And so all of
Colleagues,
that I see
in this context,
essentially
I would like to
as
express my
adjunct
gratitude to all of you
support to
for supporting
the,
India's proposal of
the
creation
alliance-based
of two
system.
new working
That is
groups
where
on
deterrence
startups and
resides.
innovation
Deterrence
and on
against China
traditional medicines
resides
this
through
year.
the US and its
Lastly,
bilateral alliances.
I'm
But to
happy
manage
to note
stability,
that the
so
regulations
deterrence
to
in the bilateral
operationalize
alliances,
these working groups
soft
have
balancing
been
through the
approved by member
minilaterals,
states.
the three and the four-sided
Excellencies,
polygons.
SCO
But
is in
then
its third decade of
stability
existence,
can be
and this is
reinforced
an
through
opportune time
multilateral
for
and
its reform
multipolar
and
nature of the region.
modernization
So,
to
the
keep the
ASEAN Regional
organisation
Forum, the East Asia Summit, all of these
relevant
institutions
in a
that
rapidly
so far have
transforming world.
underperformed
I'm
and
pleased
so
to note
far have not
that
lived
the
up to their
discussions
promise,
on
but
the
actually
issues of
have
reform and modernization of the
strategic stability,
organization have
confidence
already
building,
commenced.
preventive diplomacy
I assure
written
you
into
that India
their
will extend its
mandates which actually
constructive and
China
active
accepted
support
once
for this
upon
process.
a time. We don't
I
need
also seek the
to
support of
create a
member
whole
states
new
for the
Indo-Pacific
long-standing
security
demand,
architecture, and that may sound
of
a
India
little
to make
strange coming from
English
someone who's
as
a
the
strong
third
advocate
official language
of the Indo-Pacific as a
organization.
strategic
This
system.
will enable a deeper
But of
engagement
course,
with
a
English-speaking
one-size-fits-all
member
that
states
brings in all of the small countries of the region is going to be incredibly unwieldy.
of the SCO,
It's
and
the
will take the
minilaterals
work of
like
this
the
organization
Quad that
to
can
a wider
provide the
global
glue
audience.
that connects
I'm happy
the other
to note
parts
that
of the
the
system. The Quad
progress
is,
on
as we
ongoing
heard in this
process for the
conference that I've
admission
seen
of
here at the
Iran
White House,
and
I call it
Belarus
kind of an island
as
of
full
trust.
members of the
And
SCO.
we've got to keep expanding
I thank
that
the
island of trust,
Secretariat for their
Quad
efforts
engaging
in
with
that
other
direction.
partners in development,
Similarly,
capacity
I'm
building,
delighted that 4
and
new
all the
dialogue
while
partners will
keeping
sign
open
the
door
MOU
for
for their
communication
association
with China,
with
because
SCO
in many
today
ways
in Goa.
there's nothing.
We welcome our new dialogue
there's
partners
nothing that's
and
sort of
hope to
accommodating or
intensify
surrendering about
engagement
having
with them in the
a
SCO
relationship
format.
dialogue with China. It's actually trying to
Excellencies,
persuade China
India has
that all
proposed
of these other
a New Delhi
diplomatic
declaration
arrangements are
as
there
an
for a
SCO
stability.
summit
It's actually,
declaration,
I think,
and
going back
4
to
other
your point,
thematic
in
joint
China's
statements
interest.
on cooperation in
so let's keep that
de-radicalization.
message
So what is
getting
the
through.
red line that
Promotion
that
of
could
millets,
make
sustainable
things
lifestyles to
difficult
address
for
climate
China?
change
I mean, suppose
and
they were
digital
if the military drills that they're
I
doing
seek
right
your
now with
support in
Taiwan, if
timely
they cross
finalization
over,
of these
if that
documents
happens,
for
then
approval
what?
by our
Because
leaders
is there a
at the
plan B?
SCO summit.
Right now, what you're seeing is this
I'm confident
loosely held hub and spoke model. But what happens if there is some kind of a direct conflict? Then what happens?
So you're taking us to a very grim
Yes.
place here.
But after the Ukrainian situation,
no.
you have to have that.
Yeah, no, look, I'll answer the question. I mean, it is the key question. What happens when literally the balloon goes up?
Yeah.
In the ugliest way possible. Well, I wouldn't, in that context, I wouldn't call hub and spokes loose. I mean, the US-Japan alliance, the US-Australia alliance, they are serious alliances with mutual obligations. And although I think it's difficult to speculate about what the deterrent